Yeah.
Statistically speaking, or just from your own experience, do Christians, the Christian clients you have, do they have a greater ability to overcome this that you've seen in terms?
I think they do. I think religious, and when we say Christian, of course we're Christian, but also Orthodox Jews and religious Muslims. And okay, look, so in other words, if they believe that there is a God in their life and that this is counter to God's will, that is powerful because that keeps them focused. I got to tell you an interesting story because sometimes we say that we were talking last night about how clients have to be motivated. Sometimes I will have a client who has no motivation to change and then just spontaneously changes. As long as you develop a relationship with the client, that the client trusts you and likes you and believes, he knows that you believe he can change, even though you're not pressuring him. I have a number of guys. They'd say to me, I'm gay, I don't want to change, but it's nice to know that you think I can. First of all, yeah, what would be my advice to someone, how to recognize they're in the gray zone?
If they recognize they're in the gray zone.
Okay, if they recognize they're in the gray zone, what advice do I have for them? Okay, well, of course you want to get them out of the gray zone. One of the little truisms of reparative therapy is nothing good comes from the gray zone. Okay, it's a shutdown mode. And the problem when you're in the gray zone, you're not even motivated to get out of it. Have you noticed? It's like, I don't care. So sometimes I'll have a client come in, and right away you can see they're in the gray zone. What do you want to work on? I don't even know why I'm here. And we would try every method. The silent treatment, okay? You look at me, I'll look at you, okay? The eyeball, I'll be thinking about what I want for lunch, okay? And looking at the clock, and that didn't work. Provoking them, being nice to them, they're shut down, you can't reach them. What we find, the technique around that is to say to them, how long have you been in the gray zone? And trace it back. If they get the aha moment, then I say to them, right now, go to that moment, how did you feel then? And they feel that jolt. And then we start working, then they become alive. You see, it's very interesting because to engage in homosexual activity, you have to lose yourself first. Really, you have to lose, think of it on the theological level. You have to forget the greatest gift that was given to you, which is your unique identity. God gives each individual a unique identity. You have to forget that before you can sin. So it's interesting because the aha moment is almost like where, oh, that's where I lost myself. Do you ever notice when you lose your keys? You're looking around, and then when you see your keys, you go, what do? You go, oh, there it is. See, there's a jolt of recognition. So the client has a jolt, oh, that's where I left myself. And then when they remember that, they become alive again. What's really very helpful is to speak of it as trauma. Now, this is very interesting because we are moving into EMDR, and EMDR is a whole new developmental school in psychology. Francine Shapiro was the founder of EMDR, and she gave a conference, and I went up to her. I said, I have one client, I didn't want to tell her I have a whole clinic. I said, I have one client who thinks that his homosexuality is due to trauma in childhood. Do you think it's appropriate to use EMDR? And she, revealing her ignorance, said, yes, as long as his homosexuality was not biologically based. Well, how am I supposed to know? How does anybody know? We didn't give them a DNA test before they walk in? It doesn't make sense.
Explain EMDR.
Well, we did EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocess program, going back and forth and back and forth. We talked about that. That's EMDR. Francine Shapiro was the one that was walking. She saw the birds, and she started this. It's a very well-established, well-proven technique for trauma. So what seems to get people's attention in a new way is to say, we see homosexuality as a result of childhood trauma. And it's true. Like I said last night, it's been 40 years since the 73 decision. But during those 40 years, there has never been a credible model of child development, a non-traumatic model of child development which ends in homosexuality. There's no way to explain homosexual outcome in the normal, natural way. It's just not talked about. If you traumatize a child in a particular way, he will be homosexual. If you do not, he will be heterosexual. All right. Okay, now we do body work. Before we did EMDR, we used to do body work. So the evolution of reparative therapy is just talk therapy as the standard psychotherapy. And then we realized the importance of mentorship, where the therapist is not just a neutral, he's actively engaging. It's a mentorship. I'm a man, I am concerned about you, I am salient, and I'm going to help you work through this. That's what our clients wanted. If it was a woman dealing with lesbianism, we gave her a woman therapist. So that was the first evolution. The second evolution was body work. We talk about the triangle of containment. We say to the client, do you want to do body work on this? For example, if he says, oh, I just had a fight with my friend, and I'm very upset, and we'll say to them, do you want to do body work on this? What does that mean? That means visualize your friend, visualize a conflict, stay with your body, and stay connected to me. And if you do anything other than those 3 points, I'll bring you back. The triangle of containment. The guy in the middle is the client. And they say, okay, let's do it. So we'll just do it for a period of time during the session. And it fast forwards the therapy because it eliminates all the chit-chat. And if they talk about anything other than the image, the body, and connect it to me, I'll bring them back. Now, the body sensations change, and the image or the visual might change in their mind, but that's okay. All right. What we have found is to do body work or EMDR on homoerotic images. Now, we don't use pornography. If the client wants to use pornography, fine, but we don't advocate it. I just say come up with a picture of a male image that you would find sexually arousing. And they could use imagination, they could use fantasy, or they can use an actual picture. Actual picture is better because we have something tangible to hold on to. And I say, when you look at the picture, what do you feel in your body? Now let me go back, let me just go, there's so much information here. So let me go back to before we even talk about this, all right? When the client comes to you and you say to him, what is the homosexual moment, your homosexual attraction feel like? If you're walking down the street and you see a good-looking guy, what do you feel? Oh, I have a sexual attraction. That's what a gay guy will tell you. I know I'm gay because when I walk down the street, I see a good-looking guy, I get a sexual attraction. If you get them to pay attention, the first thing they feel is a tightness in the chest. A tightening, gripping in the chest. As you see right there. Then the second feeling is a dropping, sinking, collapsing, which is shame. Then you have the homosexual arousal. So you have 3 physiological reactions. First, grip, tightening in the chest, which is fear. Secondly, dropping, sinking, collapsing. And then third is sexual arousal. In between those 3 physiological responses is an identity shift. The false identity, the fantasy theater that we spoke about a few minutes ago. Either the passive, weak, little pathetic guy who wants to connect with the big strong man, or they become the aggressive masculine who's punishing the little boy. All right? So in this a very interesting way, the homosexual moment is a re-traumatizing moment. Why would he feel fear in his chest when he sees a good-looking guy? Because he reminds him of what he is not. It's a jolting, shocking reminder of what I'm not. he represents the kind of men who rejected me. He represents the kind of guy that made me feel bad about me. Fear, shame, drop, collapse. And then the repairing of sexuality, because sex is used as a way of conquering, mastering. That's the early psychoanalytic understanding. Sex as power. Sex to conquer the feared object. These three movements happen so quickly that it feels like one. So you ask a gay guy, they go, oh, I felt a jolt. Sexual. But if they pay attention, it'll break down to three. And that's what we teach our clients to do. In between those three is the false identity. Now, a psychoanalytic writer whose name was Joyce McDougall said that in all the perversions, this was in the good old days when you could speak like the word perversion. Now we have to say preference. Joyce McDougall said that in all the perversions, the person engaging in the sexual perversion goes into a fantasy theater. He reenacts something that represents the origins of the trauma. That's the reparation. And it's usually dominance, submission. That's why you have a lot of S&M in the gay culture. A lot of dominance, submission, a lot of bondage and stuff like that. Controlling. The client may not even be aware that he is engaging in this identity. So the fear causes him to abandon his assertion, go into shame, and then the physiology, the change in the body of diminishment of the shame posture is justified by a shift in identity. In other words, the mind has to make sense of the body. The mind has to make sense of the body. The mind is willing to alter its perception of itself to conform to the sensations in the body. And then it's a homosexual enactment. If you interrupt any of those steps, the client cannot get aroused. So I'll say to him, look at the picture, monitor the fear. And they look at the picture and they just relax the chest. And when they relax the chest, there's no arousal. Down to zero. Then I'll say to them, now get aroused. Well, what do you mean get aroused? I'm coming here not to get aroused. And they don't know what they're doing. They're going, and they're getting, oh yeah, I'm getting it, yeah, uh-huh. I know, what are you doing? They go, what do you mean, what am I doing? Oh, what did you do to get aroused? They don't even know what they did. I had to become this small little wimpy guy again. I remember a client telling me 20 years ago, in order to get aroused, I have to shame myself. I never understood what that meant. They have to diminish themselves. They have to go into this fantasy. And they have to make this other guy this more than what he is. That's why there's so much anonymous sexual activity in the gay world. Because I don't want to get to know who this guy is. If I really know who he is, it's going to be harder to make him what I want him to be. I'm working with a client right now from Tahiti. He calls me from Tahiti. And he is Asian, and he's kind of small and thin and very young looking. And he has this fantasy of being a little boy with Big Daddy. Now, the guy he is involved with is a guy named Bruce who lives in San Francisco. And whenever he flies to San Francisco, he and Bruce enact this homosexual thing where Bruce is the daddy and he's the little boy. That's the theatrical enactment that Joyce McDougall is talking about. But if my client is aware that Bruce is an unemployed plumber living with his mother, it's kind of hard to get going. You know what I mean? And if he has to forget that he is a business owner with 6 employees, see, that's what we're talking about here. It's an abandonment of the true self in order to engage in homosexual activity. So if the client is able to stay calm, let's look at the right side. If he's able to stay calm in the chest and feel an expansive, open solidness, that will lead him to self-compassion. He will be connected to himself. His stomach and his chest area will be relaxed, and he will have a realistic perception of himself and of the other. So when he's looking at the picture, when there's no arousal, he's saying things like, why would a guy pose naked? Why would he be doing this? He doesn't look very happy. I wonder what they're paying him. I wonder what his day job is. See, I'm seeing him as a real guy. And I'm able to do that because I'm real. And as they continue to look at the picture, they go back and forth. So they'll say, you know, I'm really feeling angry at this guy, but you know, I'm not really angry at him. I'm angry at my older brother, who this guy reminds me of. So in other words, there's a clarity. So we're able to do grief work. We're able to look at stuff in the past. So we deal with present issues, which is, again, the same-sex issues of attention, affection, approval. I feel strong and I see clearly that I need to have good, real friends, that this picture is just a false substitute for what I really need. And I'm able to deal with grief work in the past. So the diagram that I showed you early on, ASGZHEG, see it the way it fits. So a good-looking guy prompts shame, and that will throw him in the gray zone, which is the dropping, sinking, the false identity, and the homosexual enactment. You see how they fit in. The client who is in therapy has to know this. They have this memorized experientially. Let me give you just another scenario that we use, what's related to this. We'll ask the client to come up with a picture that he's aroused, either fantasy, memory, or picture. And he'll look at it, and I'll say, from 0 to 10, how strong is the arousal? 8. Put the picture down. And I say to them, on the scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're in a complete shame state, and 10 is you're in a complete assertion state, where are you right now? And they'll say, a 5. Okay, so we have a sexual arousal of an 8, and we have an assertion of 5. Those are your numbers. Then I'll say to them, let's build up your assertion. Let's see how you can kick into that good, solid, strong feeling in your body. And they don't know how to do it. Like, what do I do? Just willfully do that? I go, oh no. We're going to build it up with what we call person memory symbols. These are 3 things we use: EMDR or body work. EMDR is even better. Person memory symbol. Can you think of a person, a man, that admires you, respects you, and makes you feel good about yourself? They go, oh, yeah. And they identify one salient man that affirms them in their masculinity. Visualize talking to him, visualize his face, and do some EMDR. Hands, audio, or visual. And we start to build up. And what do you get? What's your assertion? It went from a 5 to a 6. Let's do it some more. 5 to a 7. Great, we'll take it. Then we'll go to memory. Do you remember a time when you achieved something, you accomplished something, and you felt proud of yourself, and people around you recognized it, and they gave you that affirmation? Yes. Feel it in your body. EMDR, back and forth, builds it up. What's your assertion? 8 or 9. Let's go for a 10. Think of a symbol that represents your masculinity. A symbol that is private to you, that matches your desire to overcome your SSA and be the man you want to be. And it's very interesting what they come up with. By this time, the unconscious is working. One guy will say a granite rock. Another guy will be the fishing rod that my grandfather gave me. Another guy will say, if they go back to the gay identity, if they go back to homosexuality, then they did not know themselves well enough. They need to know that this is something vigilant. Now, you got to pay attention. This is work. You have to stay in your assertion. You got to know that preceding scenario. If you feel shamed, you got to identify it. You have to take responsibility for it. Because when they fall, if you talk to them, I was not staying in touch with my friends, my wife was dominating me, I would work extra hours at work, so they lost themselves. That's what you have to pay attention to. The homosexual temptation you don't have to deal with. You have to pay attention to yourself. One of the ministry guys said to me, when my homosexuality comes up, it's a signal that I'm not taking care of myself. And that's exactly right. In my book, Shame and Attachment, I have a poem written by someone. Thank you, homosexuality. Thank you. Because you tell me that I'm not in tune with myself. When that comes up, I say, okay, what's going on with me? See, suddenly the attention is away from him back to me. I come back to myself. So if they go back, they didn't learn their lesson and they were not applying their lessons. That's simply that. The metaphor, the relationship between shame and homosexuality, I say if you work on the shame, you don't have to worry about your homosexuality. It's like a man who goes to a doctor. He says, doctor, I have a lower back problem. And the doctor says, let me see you walk. So the guy walks up, turn around, come back. He said, stop. He said, lift your shoulders up, lift your chest up, and walk like that. And the guy starts walking. He says, wow, there's no pain. He said, that's what you got to do. Just worry about your posture. So the guy is very happy, goes home. 3 days later, the back pain. If I change my posture, it goes. So the pain is a reminder of my posture. If I walk correctly, there is no pain. And that's where the religious dimension, if I'm walking correctly, if I'm walking in my true God-given nature, and my true God-given nature is to be alive to myself and alive to others. Because shame is a loss of self. The theological implications of reparative therapy are brilliant. I mean, think about it. Be not ashamed. Be not afraid. Christianity began, fear. If you look at the picture, without fear, there's no arousal. If you get scared, there's arousal. When did Christianity begin? When Jesus was born? No. Christianity began when the angel appeared to Mary. What's the first? That was when the divine world and the human world met. When the angel appeared to Mary. What's the first thing that the angel said? Be not afraid. The first words of Christianity is be not afraid. If we become afraid, we lose our center. And that opens us up for all kinds of sin. Yes?
You do the eye movement thing. Do you suggest to your clients they do that when they get tempted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, did I understand you even when you're doing the positive stuff?
Now this is really very interesting. And the fascinating thing about this is that EMDR diminishes homosexuality and increases opposite sex attraction. Now, EMDR has no political agenda. You're just moving your eyes left and right. But when you do that, and when you foster the connection between left brain and right brain, the person moves naturally toward heterosexuality, which tells us that it's the normal state, right? If we want to build up the opposite sex attraction, they'll come up with a picture. It doesn't have to be pornographic. Nice looking girl. What's the level of arousal? 0. Let's build up the, again, memory, persons, symbol. How are you feeling about yourself? Hold it. Look at the picture. She looks more attractive. How is it that when they're in their assertion, their attraction to women increases and their attraction to men decrease? That's evident. Homosexuality is not equivalent to heterosexuality. It's fundamentally different. It's based on a flaw. It's based on a trauma. Yeah.
So in a sense, you don't conquer this by focusing on homosexuality. You put your attention on
Exactly. We don't even talk about homosexuality.
and by doing this, in a sense, you're creating new habits in the person.
Absolutely. We're changing the self-states. We're teaching our clients to move away from the shame moment. Now, there are a couple of ways of dealing with shame moments. Let me spend a few minutes on this. This is practical stuff. The name of the game here is to identify the shame moment, clear it up, and move back to the assertion. That's the whole thing, right? And if they keep doing it, they'll do it automatically. You don't have to think about it. It's like driving. You don't have to think about driving. When you were learning how to drive, you had to remember all this stuff. Okay, so there are a number of techniques that we teach our clients to do when the shame moment comes up. One is EMDR, but it's hard to do it in the moment. I mean, you're talking to a friend and you start doing this. So, but if it lingers and you're alone, then you can do it. Okay? The other one is what we call the SBSS, shame-based self-statements. And this is a little procedure we have. When they have the feeling, see, they don't know what's going on. All they know is they feel lousy, they feel bad. See, that's the gray zone. They've been shamed, but they can't remember what it is. So the left brain is shut down, and the right brain is feeling something, and they're about to go into the gray zone. So this is a technique we use. We say, identify the shame-based self-statement. What's the shame statement you're telling yourself? I am weak. I am not masculine, whatever it is. I am unlovable, whatever. Short sentence, starts with I, present tense, shame-based self-statement. Then you give it the truth test. Is it true or is it false? Now sometimes they'll go, I am not masculine. They go, no, that's not true. I mean, I'm working on it. I know. And it pops them out. They see that it's a false statement. What are we doing? We're taking the nonverbal affect of the right brain and we're transferring it linguistically to the left brain, because the left brain deals with logic, linguistics, linearity. So now in the form of a shame-based self-statement, the left brain can look at it and assess it. And it's containing the flooding of the right brain. It's putting it in context. And it'll say, no, that's wrong. And the person will pop out of it. There'll be a unification between left brain and right brain. Now, what if it's true? I really am not masculine. I really am. My left brain is saying, yeah, the feelings you're feeling are justified. You're not like all the other guys. Then you ask the next question, why is it true? By the way, gays never ask why. Why is it true? And the why will always lead them to the past. Because of my background. Because of what happened to me. If I'm lousy in baseball, because no one ever took me out to show me how to throw a ball. Because I spent so much time with my mother and no one took me away. That's going to lead to self-compassion and grief. And there's a real affect there. And the person will have shifted from the shame to grief. And remember, good things always happen in assertion and grief. Grief is painful, but something always good comes out of it because you're alive in grief. You're feeling your feelings in grief. Gray zone is a pseudo grief. It's a half-assed grief. It's a false grief. Just like homosexual enactment is a false assertion, the gray zone is a false grief. In fact, if you look at the diagram, you have 5. 2 good, assertion and grief. 2 bad, gray zone and homosexual enactment. And they're controlled by the switch of shame. You flip the switch on, it throws the person into the 2 unproductive, self-defeating self-states. And if you shut the shame off, he's back to assertion or grief. Very mechanistic, very simplistic. It really works. Yes?
On the triangle, what does the IBT stand for?
Image, body, therapist. Those are the 3 focuses. Any questions? By the way, we have it on video. It's really very interesting. The kid looks at it, he gets an arousal, then we do the whole thing, and then it goes down to 0, and then we keep doing it, and he has an arousal for a female. And it's about 20 minutes. Very, very impressive. But you see, you're doing that because you're showing the client that your homosexuality is determined by your own state of mind. That's very powerful. But to really produce long-term change, you just can't keep doing that. To produce long-term change, you have to do EMDR on past shame memories to clear the circuitry. Otherwise, they keep tripping over themselves. They get out of it, but they trip over it. So you have to go back and wipe out those early shame memories. And the shame memories are always about gender. Yes?
So somebody who doesn't struggle with homosexuality, when they are engaged in the shame phase, how does that?
Well, it'll probably put them in the gray zone, and it'll probably lead them to some kind of unhealthy adaptation. I mean, there are healthy affect regulators and there are healthy affect regulators and unhealthy affect regulators. Unhealthy affect regulators might be sexuality, drug, spending, whatever. And healthy affect regulators are primarily relational, including our relationship to God. That's an affect regulator. How many times do we get frazzled and we turn to prayer, or we turn to prayerful meditation and we get centered? That works for us. Yeah. Yes?
What works to help someone break out of a victim mindset?
Say again, I'm sorry?
What do you find helps someone to break out of a victim mindset? So you talk about
Van den Aardwyck talked, he said that the characteristic of the homosexual condition is self-pity. And we see that there's a victim mindset built into this. Okay? By the way, the gay political agenda is a projection of their victimhood onto society. You're making us feel bad. Okay? So it's a cultural projection of their victimhood. Okay? And they will stay. The client will never move forward in therapy if he holds on to his victimhood. So he has to look at the consequence of that. What's the price you're paying for surrendering your own personal power? What's the price you're paying for remaining as a victim? And we'll do some confrontive therapy there. The other thing which you're trying to do is teach him how to identify his assertion. And characteristic of the assertion is the phrase we use, feeling and dealing. When you're in your assertion, you're feeling your feelings and you're dealing with your feelings with others. You're dealing with others with your feelings. So feeling and dealing is another way of saying I'm present to myself and I'm connected to others. That's not being a victim. What they do is because why? Because of their family background, the relationship with the mother and the father, my parents didn't attune to me. There was nothing I could say or do that would get them to see me for who I am. All my clients tell me, I think my parents loved me, but I know they didn't know me. They didn't understand me. Universally, they did not feel understood by their parents. What does it mean to be understood? It means that when I express a part of me, the other person gets it. And that gives me a sense of competence. That gives me the sense that if I express myself, I will be heard. The victim doesn't believe he will be heard. That's why he's a victim. He doesn't believe that his words will have influence. So that's to answer some of the how to deal with the victimhood. But it's that passivity which is a big part of the